Shocking live moment. CBC panel mocks Mark Carney's leadership blunder. A political panel meant to dissect summer strategy quickly turned into a blistering indictment of Prime Minister Mark Carney's performance when Raitt delivered a cutting remark that sent even Liberal and NDP panelists into visible laughter. The televised CBC moment, now widely circulated, came as Raitt pointed out the absurdity of Carney's European summit posturing without any clear fiscal roadmap back home. It was a rare moment of cross-partisan amusement at the expense of Canada's new Liberal leader, and it underscored deeper concerns about Carney's competence, priorities, and credibility at a time when the country faces mounting economic and social pressure. Carney, who became Prime Minister following the April 2025 snap election, has so far leaned heavily into an ambitious, high-speed rollout of legislation and policy branding. His signature project, Bill C-5, was sold as a unifying One Canadian Economy act aimed at breaking down internal trade barriers and fast-tracking major development. Yet critics argue that beyond the headlines, much of his progress is either superficial or stalled. Even Bill C-5 passed only after the Conservatives forced it to be stripped of its most authoritarian clauses. Meanwhile, key pledges like interprovincial trade reform remain stuck in bureaucratic limbo. The CBC panel's mockery reflected a broader frustration. Carney has big ideas, but few results. The Conservatives, still reeling from their loss in the snap election, are also struggling with internal direction. Raitt didn't mince words. Without Pierre Poilievre physically present in the House of Commons, the Conservative Party lacks strategic clarity. She insisted that their top priority must be winning the Battle River, Crowfoot by-election so that Poilievre can re-enter Parliament and lead the opposition with full force. Until then, their message remains fragmented, and their capacity to challenge Carney's legislative blitz is weakened. Raitt's comments signal a pressing need for Conservative regrouping, not just to oppose, but to offer a coherent alternative. The NDP, meanwhile, is in a state of quiet collapse. With only 7 MPs remaining, the party has become virtually invisible on the national stage. According to panelists, a leadership race is expected to be announced by midsummer, with potential candidates preparing to reconnect with voters via summer BBQs and grassroots events. But whether that will be enough to salvage their relevance remains to be seen. The NDP's brand confusion, along with its declining presence in Parliament, makes it hard to imagine a robust recovery without significant renewal in leadership and vision. What made the CBC panel exchange so jarring wasn't just Raitt's jab. It was the fact that Liberal and NDP commentators couldn't suppress their laughter. The moment captured something many Canadians have started to feel, that Carney, for all his polished speeches and international credentials, is increasingly disconnected from the fiscal realities facing everyday people. There's a growing sense that he's governing from the boardroom, not the community hall. Raitt's brutal but brief takedown exposed a vulnerability in Carney's leadership style, a tendency to prioritize global optics over domestic execution. Away from Parliament Hill, the consequences of weak leadership are playing out in full view. In several cities, including Edmonton, Canadians are lighting fires in the streets just to stay warm. These aren't isolated acts of protest, they're acts of survival. The government's inability to address homelessness, inflation, and the cost of living crisis is creating conditions that resemble economic breakdown. For critics, these visuals are a direct rebuke to Carney's technocratic promises. They expose the widening gap between elite policy circles and the brutal daily reality on the ground. At the heart of the public's frustration is the perception that Carney's Liberals are more focused on controlling the narrative than on fixing systemic issues. Despite talking points about reconciliation and infrastructure transformation, there's little follow-through. Infrastructure projects remain bogged down in regulation. Promised partnerships with Indigenous communities are slow to materialize. Even climate goals are being questioned, especially given the government's aggressive electric vehicle mandates, which many see as unachievable, top-down impositions rather than grassroots environmental efforts. Adding to the chaos is a spike in violent and erratic crime. One viral story from West Edmonton Mall featured a man fleeing law enforcement by leaping from a balcony, breaking both legs in the process. While the incident was bizarre, it echoed a deeper concern: the sense that Canada's justice system has lost its deterrent effect. Critics argue that soft-on-crime policies and bail reforms have emboldened repeat offenders. Many Canadians now fear that even the most reckless behavior will go unpunished, and in some cases, even uncharged. Public health data further underscores the social deterioration. Independent analysts like Marty Up North have pointed to a disturbing rise in all-cause mortality, suggesting a death rate over 10% higher than in 2018. Though official sources cite a combination of factors, aging population, delayed care during the pandemic, some argue this increase is fueled by economic despair, poor access to health services, and widespread mental health crises. In the absence of targeted policy responses, critics blame systemic Liberal failures for allowing these issues to compound. One of the most contentious pieces of Carney's early tenure has been the electric vehicle mandate, which seeks to rapidly phase out gasoline-powered cars. Though branded as a green revolution, the policy has drawn backlash from both urban and rural voters who see it as elitist and impractical. In provinces still grappling with electricity reliability, the forced transition feels rushed and ideological. Detractors argue it's less about environmental protection and more about regulatory control and corporate profit. They question whether the policy truly serves the Canadian people or merely panders to global markets. Despite the criticism, Carney's defenders maintain that the Prime Minister is laying the groundwork for transformative change. They argue that bold moves come with resistance and that the pace of progress inevitably generates friction. From this perspective, the laughter on the CBC panel was less about mocking incompetence and more about resistance to necessary disruption. Still, optics matter, and when even friendly commentators chuckle at your expense, the signal is clear: the honeymoon phase is over. In the months ahead, all three major parties face defining challenges. Conservatives must prove they can move from opposition to proposition, with Poilievre back at the helm. Liberals need to match rhetoric with delivery, or risk losing public trust. And the NDP, on the verge of irrelevance, must find a leader who can rebuild from the ashes. As summer heats up, so does the pressure on Canada's political class to stop posturing and start performing. The public is watching, and as one CBC panel moment proved, they're also laughing.